Remember to like and subscribe. For part 2, comment down below. The story begins with our protagonist Reina Rebel. We see her running along the hallway, then stops in front of a big door. Upon opening, she blushes and with glistening eyes says father. She stops, sensing something off. Suddenly her father Marquis Rima grabs her. The man in the chair says she will be a sacrifice. Her mind goes blank for a moment, as her father holds her shoulder and tells her it's all for his majesty, and grabs her shoulders in a tight hold. Crying and trying to break free from his grip, he stares at her without a hint of remorse. 6 years later we see her on the ground with her belongings scattered. A young girl appears and shouts at the gang. To this day I'm not sure if she's a kid or a lolly. The gang then laughs. The prota hugs the maid and says she is the daughter of a marquis. They laugh and say no noble would walk the streets with a single maid. He grabs her face and tells her she has expensive merchandise. The maid holds onto Reina and screams. They laugh and say she will also sell for a high price since some people like them young. The thug grabs her before getting his head smash into the wall. As his nose bleed, he stares at the man in the hood and attacks him. The man dodges and beats him with a single punch. He glares at the other men who run away with their unconscious friend. The maid shouts and says if he going to try and sell them too. He takes off his hood and offered to escort them home. In the next scene we see them eating a small feast. Reina thanks the guy for helping them. He responds he didn't expect them to follow him home since they only know each other's name. Here we find that the man's name is Lin. Reina offers to leave if it's uncomfortable. Lin becomes flustered and says it's okay. He says he's never heard of Marquis Rebel having a daughter. She responds that it's not official but few people know. He assumes she is an illegitimate child. He warns her that the capital is dangerous, and she will be a target because she's pretty. And if she continues she'll be sold or people will help her for something in return. She asked if he is saying he wants something in return. Lin gets off the chair and stands in front of her. She stares at him with deadly intent. Then he puts his knife in the table. He tells her if he tries anything she should stab him. He turns around. She laughs and tells him, they're similar and he's also beautiful. He thinks she's slow. Later in the night we see Lin in Reina's bed. He lays on top of her. He puts a finger over his lip. She asked if she should stab him now. He drags them out of bed and suddenly a thug from before barges in with the officer. He screams at Lin and accused him of theft. Lin tells him to leave while he still can. He smiles and grips his palm as a dark aura emits from an object in his hand. The thug cuts his hand. Lin is shocked when he sees a wolf-like monster has been summoned. It charges at Lin, who blocks but is pushed back. Reina then intervenes and tries to shield Lin. He sidesteps her and fights the monster. The thug says she's naive. She responds, you're the one being naive, your actions will not be forgiven. This upsets the thug and the monster lunges towards Reina. Lin screams her name as her clothes are soaked in blood. He stares in shock as he sees the monster standing with a severed head, and Reina stands elegantly as everyone looks. A sound was heard from the thug hand. They look at him, then his body began to change into a beast-like form. His eyes turned red. He attacks the closest person to him. The man screams in pain as Reina walks towards them unfazed. The thug throws his victim away, and charges towards Reina. She knocks him in the head with the hilt of her dagger. The thug falls unconscious with a thud. She warns the other accomplice to watch who they pick fights with. She knelt down and asked where he got an altar stone. The accomplices stutter. With a threatening voice she asks if she's being too nice. This startled them and they tell her everything they know. She takes the stone. Reina tells them they must take responsibility. The maid crawls from under the bed, and brush herself off. She extends her hand as the men hug one another. She says hand over everything you have. The next day Lin confronts Reina saying it was all an act. She comments that she was just being polite. He responds you think it's polite to let thugs kidnap you. The maid and Reina share a nervous glance. They claim it was an act of social justice because they needed money too. In simple terms they were stealing. Reina pretends to cry as Lin remembers how he told her to stab him. Thinking he was being cool, he started to blush and become embarrassed. Reina shows him the altar stone which is the connection between hell and earth. She asks if this was what he came for. Lin had heard that one was in the area and decided to investigate. He nods in agreement. She stares into his eyes and asks if he'll take it by force. He sighs and tells her it's theirs to keep. Reina looks stunned for a moment before smiling. She reassures him that although they didn't need to be rescued but they needed kindness. She gives him the stone. Lin is surprised and says he's in her debt. She beams with joy, and asks if he'll be leaving for the Imperial Palace. He tells her she cannot go with him. He already traveling with someone. She bids him farewell. And the outskirts of the city, in a forest, a camp is set up where a group of knights welcomes their leader His Grace Lin. A soldier announced Lin accomplishments in the time of 2 days. They leave immediately because their mission is now complete. As they ride in their horses, Lin smiles and looks back in the memories he had made with Reyna. He wonders how she would react if she knew he was a duke. A knight named Decca tells him he looks happy. Lin feels awkward and quickly puts on a straight face. He asks if the Marquis Rebel is a daughter. Marquis Rebel of the North and Duke Lin of the East don't get along. Decca says his only daughter had died years ago. Her name was Reyna. Lin became stunned. He thinks the girl he met was Ghost. He decides to find out when they meet again. In a carriage ride, Reyna and her maid reminisce and Lin. They wonder what he does for a living with his skill set. The maid asks what she'll do when she sees her father. She grins and responds, "I'll give him a chance to earn my forgiveness." When Reyna was younger, she lived in a villa outside the city until she was 6. This was because of nobles who felt that her mother should be away from her child to focus in giving birth to an heir. Little Reyna would always stare at the painting of her parents and dream of going back home. When she turned 6, she received a message to come home. Little Reyna clapped. As she yelled yes, her smile was so beautiful. When she arrived, her parents greeted her. She only knew them through a painting, but they were even more beautiful than the painting. With teary eyes, she bowed and introduced herself. She thought this was the beginning of her happy life. Back to the current timeline, they approach the Imperial Palace while a festival celebrating the foundation of the kingdom was occurring. The maid says if they get in line now, they can get in by nightfall. Reyna replies, "We're going straight inside. We have an invitation." The maid searched and finds the invitation they got from an old man. She gives it to the knight. In their room, the maid is in awe of everything. Reyna looks into the mirror, and the maid asks where she's going. Reyna smiles as if reading her mind. The maid says if she's going to meet her father now, she says there is nothing stopping her from going. When she leaves, two knights block her way, and gives her a letter that states she shouldn't use his grief against him and that this is just warning. She tries to make a request to the guards. They denied it. The steward then appears. They enter the room. She tries to start a conversation. He shouts and says why would she pretend to be a dead person. She tries to persuade him by telling him a story from when she was young, of how he put 2 layers of carpets to prevent her from falling because it happened once. The carpet had become higher so everyone fell anyways. He gets angry and asks where she got the information. He stands and tells her she bringing up unwanted painful memories. At that moment a servant walks in with sweets. The steward offers her some tea before she leaves. He orders the servant to leave. He sighs and sprinkle a white substance into the tea. He places it on the table. They exchange eye contact, then Reyna takes the tea. The steward thinks it's over. Just then Reyna asks what would happen if her corpse appeared tomorrow. The steward looks down and starts to sweat. Reyna smirks and says she just kidding before drinking the entire cup. She leaves and bursts into her room and vomits into the sink. She falls to the ground as the maids come to help. She tells her she was poisoned but she had to drink it because it was someone she knew. It was a neurotoxin that would have paralyzed and kill her quietly. She starts to laugh, sending the maid into a panic. The maid asks if she meet her father. She says no, but she meet the steward and received a letter that he was grieving, so she felt conflicted until she heard him putting poison in the tea. The maid asks why she drank it. She responds he was trying so hard. It's not like that's enough to kill, although it still will hurt. They'll soon come to check if she's alive and send an assassin. Reyna says it's possible, and the maid says we have to write in the bed what side is yours and mine. In the night she starts to grip her stomach. Her body feels like it's burning. She wobbles out of bed, and jumps from the balcony. She thinks love affairs happen around this time in the garden. She feels as if something behind her. She jumps back and sees Lin.